Tonight, every lie dies with you.
The thing about Halloween parties in suburbia is that everyone thinks they're being clever with their costumes. But really, they're just revealing who they wish they were underneath their mortgage payments and minivan schedules. Take my wife Alicia, for instance. Standing across the crowded living room in her skin-tight Catwoman outfit, she wasn't just wearing leather, she was wearing confidence like she owned the place, which, considering this was Richard and Nikki's McMansion and not ours, seemed a little presumptuous. But then again, Alicia had always been presumptuous. It's what attracted me to her 12 years ago and what had been slowly driving me insane for the last 2. "Greg, you look like you're planning someone's funeral," Richard said, appearing at my elbow with 2 beers. He was dressed as a pirate, complete with a foam sword that kept getting caught in people's costumes. "It's Halloween, man. Lighten up." "Just observing the natives," I replied, accepting the beer. Amazing how much people reveal about themselves when they think they're hiding behind a mask. Richard followed my gaze to where Alicia was laughing with her best friend Susie, who had also come as Catwoman. 2 Catwomen at one party seemed like overkill, but apparently they'd planned it that way. Twinning, they'd called it, giggling like teenagers instead of 36-year-old mothers. "Your wife looks incredible tonight," Richard said. And there was something in his tone that made me look at him sharply. But his expression was innocent enough, hidden partly behind his fake beard. "She always does," I said, though the words felt hollow. Lately, Alicia had been looking incredible for everyone except me. New workout routine, new wardrobe, new attitude, all the classic signs that I'd been deliberately ignoring because acknowledging them would mean admitting my marriage was falling apart. The party swirled around us. Neighbors and friends I'd known for years, all transformed into superheroes, movie characters, and fantasy creatures. I'd come as myself, basically. Black jeans, black t-shirt, leather jacket. When people asked, I told them I was off-duty bouncer. It wasn't far from the truth, considering I managed Rossetti's, the upscale Italian restaurant downtown. I spent most of my nights dealing with drunk customers and entitled celebrities who thought their fame meant they could treat service staff like garbage. "There's Dominic," Richard said, nodding toward the kitchen entrance. "Haven't seen him in forever." I followed his gaze and felt my stomach tighten. Dominic Torino, dressed as Tarzan in what amounted to a loincloth and a lot of baby oil. He was built like he lived at the gym, which he probably did, considering he was between jobs again. Alicia's eyes had locked onto him the moment he walked in, and the smile that spread across her face was nothing like the polite, distant ones she'd been giving me lately. "Yeah," I said slowly. "Forever." But it hadn't been forever. It had been 3 weeks since I'd seen Dominic at the grocery store, where he'd been oddly friendly, asking about Alicia and the kids with the kind of detailed interest that had left me unsettled. And it had been 2 months since Alicia had started mentioning him in casual conversation. Ran into Dominic at the coffee shop. Dominic says the new gym downtown has better equipment. Remember how funny Dominic used to be back in college? I remembered. I also remembered that Dominic had been sniffing around Alicia since before we got married, and that she'd always claimed to find his attention flattering but harmless. Watching him cross the room toward her now, I was starting to think harmless might not be the right word. "I need another beer," I told Richard, though my first was still half full. The kitchen was supposed to be off-limits to party guests, but I'd helped Richard set up earlier and knew my way around. I pushed through the swinging door, expecting to find some quiet space to think, and instead walked into a conversation that made my blood freeze. "Can't keep doing this," Alicia was saying, her back to me as she faced Dominic near the island. "Greg's starting to notice. So what if he notices?" Dominic's voice was low, confident. "What's he going to do about it? Guy manages a restaurant, not a boxing gym." "It's not that simple. We have kids, a house." "You have a husband who doesn't appreciate what he's got," Dominic interrupted, stepping closer to her. "When's the last time he made you feel like a woman instead of just a mom and a paycheck?" I should have announced myself. Should have cleared my throat, made some noise, given them a chance to step apart and pretend this was an innocent conversation. Instead, I stood frozen, watching my wife's body language as she leaned into Dominic's words like a plant turning toward sunlight. "He's been distant lately," she admitted. "Always tired, always stressed about work. Sometimes I feel like I'm married to a ghost." "You deserve better," Dominic said, and his hand came up to touch her face. "You deserve someone who sees you, who wants you, someone who can handle a real woman." "And you think you're that someone?" Alicia's voice was soft, flirtatious in a way I hadn't heard in months. I know I am. I've been proving it to you for weeks now, haven't I? The words hit me like a physical blow. Weeks. This had been going on for weeks, and I'd been walking around like an idiot, worried about restaurant inventory and whether the kids needed new soccer cleats. The hotel room last Tuesday was incredible, Alicia whispered. But we can't keep meeting like that. What if someone sees us? Let them see, Dominic said, pulling her closer. Let your husband see. Maybe it's time he knew what he's losing. That's when I stepped into the light, my beer bottle hitting the marble countertop with a sharp crack that made both of them jump apart. Maybe it's time he did, I said, my voice surprisingly steady considering my heart was trying to punch its way out of my chest. Alicia's face went white beneath her Catwoman mask, but Dominic just smiled, lazy and confident like this was exactly what he'd been hoping for. Greg, Alicia started, but I held up a hand to stop her. No, let me get this straight, I said, looking between them. My wife has been screwing around with Tarzan here, and instead of having the decency to be embarrassed about it, you're both standing in our friend's kitchen talking about it like it's the weather. It's not what it sounds like, Alicia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Hotel rooms on Tuesday? I looked at her directly. Proving himself for weeks? What part of that am I misunderstanding? Dominic laughed, actually laughed, and crossed his arms over his oiled chest. The part where you think you have any right to be upset about it. When's the last time you took your wife somewhere nice? When's the last time you made her feel desired instead of just convenient? When's the last time you minded your own business? I shot back, taking a step toward him. Your wife became my business when she started calling me, Dominic said, not backing down. When she started showing up at my apartment because she was lonely and frustrated and married to a man who treats her like a roommate. The kitchen door swung open and Susie walked in. Took one look at the three of us and immediately tried to back out, but it was too late. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut, and her guilty expression told me she knew exactly what was going on. How long have you known? I asked her. Greg, How long, Susie? She looked at Alicia, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, but Susie's face crumpled anyway. 2 months, she whispered, but I told her it was wrong. I told her she should talk to you first, work things out. 2 months. I repeated the words slowly, letting them sink in. 2 months of lies, of Alicia coming home from her girls' nights and shopping trips, and sliding into bed next to me like nothing had happened. 2 months of me wondering why she seemed so distant, why she was always on her phone, why she'd started working out so much. Greg, let me explain, Alicia said, reaching for me. I stepped back before she could touch me. Explain what? That you're bored? That I work too much? That Dominic here makes you feel like a real woman? I looked at both of them with disgust. You want to know what makes someone a real woman, Alicia? Honesty, integrity, not sneaking around behind your husband's back with some unemployed gym rat. Dominic's face darkened. Watch your mouth. Or what? You'll steal my wife. Too late for that threat. Maybe I'll just kick your A instead. The kitchen door opened again, and Richard walked in with Nikki right behind him. They took in the scene, Alicia in tears, Susie looking guilty, Dominic puffed up like an angry rooster, and me standing there trying not to put my fist through the nearest wall. Everything okay in here? Richard asked carefully. Everything's perfect, I said. Just found out my wife's been having an affair, and her boyfriend here thinks I should be grateful for the opportunity to share. Nikki gasped. Richard's mouth fell open, and in that moment of shocked silence, I realized that this wasn't going to stay private. By tomorrow, everyone at this party would know. By next week, it would be all over the neighborhood. Greg, please, Alicia said, tears streaming down her face, smearing her carefully applied cat makeup. Can we go home and talk about this privately? Privately? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You gave up the right to privacy when you started screwing around with Tarzan. You want to air our dirty laundry? Fine, but don't expect me to help you fold it. I turned to leave, but Dominic grabbed my arm. We're not done here, he said. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. You're right, we're not. And then I punched him. It wasn't a particularly good punch. I was angry and off balance, and it had been years since I'd been in a real fight. But it connected solidly with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward into the refrigerator with a crash that brought down half the magnets and family photos. The kitchen erupted in chaos. Nikki screamed. Richard shouted something about his house. Alicia was sobbing and yelling at me to stop. And Dominic was picking himself up off the floor with homicide in his eyes. But I was already walking away, pushing through the crowd of costume party guests who had heard the commotion and come to investigate. I could hear Alicia calling my name, could feel the stares and whispers following me as I made my way to the front door. Outside, the October air was sharp and clean, a stark contrast to the suffocating atmosphere inside. I stood on Richard's front porch for a moment, looking at the jack-o'-lanterns grinning up at me from the steps, their carved faces flickering with candlelight. My phone buzzed. A text from Alicia. "Please come back. We need to talk." I deleted it without responding and walked to my car. As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, past houses decorated with fake cobwebs and plastic skeletons, I found myself thinking about costumes again, about how people used Halloween as an excuse to be someone different for one night. But maybe the real revelation wasn't who people pretended to be. Maybe it was who they really were when they thought no one was looking. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the dark car for a long moment, looking at my house, our house, the place where Alicia and I had planned to grow old together, where we'd brought our kids home from the hospital, where we'd hosted birthday parties and holiday dinners, and all the other mundane moments that make up a marriage. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow, I'd have to figure out lawyers and custody arrangements and how to explain to our kids why Mommy and Daddy weren't living together anymore. But tonight, I was going to sit in my house and plan exactly how I was going to make sure that everyone who had betrayed me got exactly what they deserved. Starting with my dear wife and her muscle-bound boyfriend, the house felt different when I woke up alone. Not just quiet, Alicia had always been a silent sleeper, but hollow, like the life had been sucked out of it overnight. I'd spent most of the night in my home office, alternating between fury and a strange, cold clarity that I'd never experienced before. By dawn, I had the beginning of a plan. My phone showed 17 missed calls and 23 text messages, mostly from Alicia, but a few from Richard and even one from Susie. I deleted them all without reading past the first few words. "Please let me explain." And, "It's not what you think," and, "We need to talk." All variations on the same theme of damage control. The coffee maker gurgled to life as I stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the Hendersons' house across the street. Margaret Henderson was already in her front yard, taking down Halloween decorations with the efficiency of someone who believed holidays should be packed away the moment they ended. She glanced toward my house and waved, but there was something different in her expression. Curious. Knowing. The neighborhood gossip network had already started spinning. My phone rang. Richard. "Jesus, Greg, where are you? Alicia's been calling everyone looking for you." "I'm at home," I said. "Where else would I be?" She said you weren't answering the door. I walked to the front window and looked out. Sure enough, Alicia's silver BMW was parked at the curb. She was sitting in the driver's seat, still wearing last night's Catwoman costume, looking like she'd slept in her car. I'm not ready to talk to her yet. "Look, man, I know last night was rough, but maybe you should hear her out. People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" I interrupted. "Richard, she's been having an affair for 2 months. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A series of choices." There was a pause. "Okay, yeah, that's fair, but she's still your wife. You guys have kids together." Had kids together. Past tense. "Don't make any decisions you'll regret when you're not so angry." I almost laughed. "I'm not angry, Richard. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years." After I hung up, I made myself breakfast and ate it slowly, deliberately, while Alicia sat in her car outside. Every few minutes, she'd get out and ring the doorbell or knock on the door, calling my name. The neighbors were starting to notice. Mrs. Chen from next door had come out twice to get her newspaper and check her mailbox. The Johnsons were suddenly very interested in their front lawn. Good, let them see. Let them all see exactly what kind of woman I'd been married to. Around 10, a second car pulled up. Dominic's black pickup truck, because apparently he thought this situation needed his particular brand of help. I watched from the upstairs bedroom window as he got out and approached Alicia's car. They talked for a few minutes, their body language animated before both of them came to my front door. The doorbell rang, followed by heavy knocking. "Greg," Dominic's voice, loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Open the door, man. We need to sort this out." I opened the window instead. "Nothing to sort out," I called down. "You want her, you can have her, but you're doing it somewhere else." "It's not like that," Alicia said, looking up at me with red, puffy eyes. "Please, just let me come in and explain." "Explain what? How you've been lying to me for months? How you've been humiliating me in front of our friends and neighbors? How you've been risking our children's stability for some cheap thrills with a guy who can't hold down a job?" Dominic stepped forward. Hey, watch your mouth about what? Your employment record? Your habit of chasing married women? Which part would you like me to be more accurate about? A few more neighbors had drifted out of their houses now, pretending to tend to their yards or walk their dogs, but really just watching the show. Margaret Henderson had abandoned her Halloween cleanup entirely and was standing on her porch with her arms crossed. "You're embarrassing yourself," Alicia said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm embarrassing myself?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh enough to make her flinch. "Alicia, you're standing in our front yard in a Halloween costume at 10 in the morning with your boyfriend begging me to take you back. If anyone's embarrassing themselves, it's not me." Dominic grabbed Alicia's arm. "Come on, this is pointless. Let him have his tantrum. We'll figure something else out." "Figure something else out?" I leaned further out the window. "Like what? Where you're going to live? Because it's not going to be here, and it's not going to be on my dime." "What's that supposed to mean?" Alicia asked. "It means I called my lawyer this morning. It means I'm freezing our joint accounts until we can sort out who gets what in the divorce. It means you might want to start thinking about how you're going to support yourself and your boyfriend on whatever you make at that part-time job of yours." The color drained from Alicia's face. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. Funny thing about infidelity, it tends to affect how judges view property division and spousal support." "Greg, please." But I was already closing the window. I watched from behind the curtain as they stood there for another few minutes, Dominic gesturing angrily while Alicia cried. Finally, they got back in their respective cars and drove away, but not before most of the neighborhood had gotten a good look at the drama unfolding on Maple Street. My phone started ringing again immediately. This time it was my lawyer, Janet Morrison, returning my early morning call. "Greg, I got your message. I'm sorry to hear about your situation, but I have to ask, are you sure you want to move this quickly? Sometimes couples counseling..." "Janet, she's been having an affair for 2 months. She was planning to continue having an affair. The only thing she's sorry about is getting caught." "Okay, but freezing the accounts might be seen as aggressive. It could hurt you in negotiations." "She's been spending our money on hotel rooms with her boyfriend. I'd say that's pretty aggressive too." There was a pause. "Do you have proof of the affair?" "I have witnesses. I have her own admission. And I'm betting if we look at credit card statements and phone records, we'll find plenty more." "All right, I'll file the paperwork this afternoon. But Greg, I want you to think carefully about what you want out of this. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it's expensive and it's hard on the kids." "I don't want revenge," I said, and I was surprised to realize I meant it. "I want justice. I want her to face the consequences of her choices, and I want to make sure that everyone who helped her or enabled her understands that there's a price for that kind of betrayal." After I hung up, I spent the afternoon going through our financial records, looking for evidence of Alicia's affair. It didn't take long to find. Hotel charges on days when she'd claimed to be shopping with Susie, restaurant bills for expensive dinners when she'd told me she was working late, a recurring charge to a gym across town, Dominic's gym, I was willing to bet. Each discovery was like a small knife twist, but also like a piece of ammunition. By the time I was done, I had a clear picture of just how long and how extensively my wife had been lying to me. My phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Dominic. We need to talk. Meet me at Murphy's bar at 8. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "See you there." Murphy's was a dive bar downtown, the kind of place where conversations were private and the bartender minded his own business. I arrived first and ordered a beer, choosing a table in the back where we could talk without being overheard. Dominic showed up 20 minutes late, probably thinking it would give him some kind of psychological advantage. He'd changed out of his Tarzan costume and into jeans and a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-sculpted physique. He was trying to intimidate me, and a week ago it might have worked. But a week ago, I hadn't known what I was capable of when pushed to my limits. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "What do you want, Dominic?" "I want to clear the air. This thing with Alicia and me, it's not what you think." "Really? What is it then?" He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Look, I'm not going to lie to you. Alicia and I have been seeing each other, but it's not some sordid affair. We have feelings for each other. Real feelings." "How romantic. I'm sure the hotel receipts really capture the depth of your emotional connection." "You don't get it, do you? She's unhappy, Greg. Has been for years. You work all the time. You're always stressed. You never pay attention to her. She feels invisible in her own marriage. So naturally, the solution was for her to start sleeping with you instead of talking to me about it. She tried talking to you. You were always too busy, or too tired, or too something. I took a sip of my beer, studying his face. What do you want, Dominic? An apology? My blessing? What's the endgame here? I want you to let her go. Cleanly. Don't drag this through the courts. Don't try to take the kids away from her. Don't make this harder than it has to be. And in return, I'll make sure she's taken care of. I'll be good to her, better than you ever were. I almost laughed. Let me get this straight. You want me to just walk away from my marriage, my kids, my house, everything I've built, so you can play house with my wife? And I should do this because you promised to be nice to her? I'm trying to do this the easy way, Greg, for everyone's sake. What's the hard way? His expression darkened. The hard way is where this gets ugly, where details come out that hurt everyone, especially the kids, where Alicia has to testify about how neglectful you've been, how you've ignored her needs, how you've been emotionally absent for years. You mean where she has to lie under oath? I mean where she has to tell the truth? I finished my beer and stood up. Thanks for the drink, Dominic. And thanks for clarifying exactly what kind of man you are. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're the kind of man who seduces another man's wife, then threatens him when he doesn't appreciate it. It means you're the kind of man who thinks he can intimidate someone into giving up their children. It means you're exactly the kind of man I thought you were. I walked away, leaving him sitting there, but I could feel his eyes on my back as I left. Outside, I sat in my car for a few minutes thinking about the conversation. Dominic had made a mistake tonight. He'd shown me exactly how he planned to play this, and he'd underestimated me completely. He thought I was just some suburban restaurant manager who would roll over when confronted by a younger, stronger man. He thought I'd be so intimidated by the prospect of a messy divorce that I'd just walk away. He was wrong on both counts. I drove home through the quiet streets, past houses where normal families were settling in for the evening, where husbands and wives were watching TV together, or helping kids with homework, or just enjoying each other's company. The life I'd thought I had until yesterday. But as I pulled into my driveway, I realized something had shifted in me during that conversation with Dominic. The hurt and betrayal were still there, but they'd been joined by something else, something colder and more focused. I wasn't just the wronged husband anymore. I was a man with nothing left to lose and a very clear idea of who was responsible for that. And I was going to make sure they all understood exactly what that meant. The first crack in their perfect little conspiracy came from an unexpected source. Susie's husband, Mark. I was at Rossetti's the next evening, trying to lose myself in work, when he showed up at the bar. Mark was a soft-spoken accountant who usually let Susie do the talking in social situations. But tonight, he looked like a man with something to get off his chest. "Can we talk?" he asked, sliding onto a bar stool. I nodded to Tommy, our bartender, who discreetly moved to the other end of the bar. The dinner rush was winding down, and the restaurant was settling into its quieter evening rhythm. "I owe you an apology," Mark said without preamble. "For what?" "For not telling you what was going on. Susie swore me to secrecy, said it wasn't my place to get involved in other people's marriages. But I should have said something." I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the bar. "How long have you known?" "Since the beginning. Susie was covering for Alicia from day one, making up stories about girls' nights and shopping trips. She even had me lie to you once, when you called looking for Alicia and she was actually with Dominic." The memory came back to me, a Tuesday evening about 6 weeks ago, when I'd gotten home early and Alicia wasn't there. I'd called Susie's house and Mark had told me they were at the mall and would be back late. I'd thought nothing of it at the time. "Why are you telling me this now?" Mark looked down at his hands. "Because Susie came home last night talking about how you were being unreasonable, how you were trying to destroy Alicia's life over a mistake. And I realized she actually believes that. She's convinced herself that what they did was okay because you're not the perfect husband. And what do you think? I think my wife helped another woman cheat on her husband and lie to her children. And now she's trying to make it sound like you're the villain for being upset about it." He looked up at me. "I think that makes me question a lot of things about my own marriage." We sat in silence for a moment, two men whose wives had betrayed them in different ways, but with equal effectiveness. "There's something else," Mark said. "Something I think you should know." "What?" "It's not just Dominic." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" I mean, Alicia's been seeing other people too. Dominic's just the most recent. There was someone from her work, her boss, I think. And before that, some guy she met at the gym. I set my water glass down carefully, afraid I might crush it if I gripped it too tightly. How do you know this? Susie talks in her sleep, has for years, and she's been having a lot of anxiety dreams lately about keeping secrets. Mark's voice was bitter. Apparently, she's been Alicia's cover story for over a year. A year? Not 2 months, a year. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to pay for our mortgage and the kids' activities and Alicia's shopping habits, she'd been systematically cheating on me with multiple men. Why are you telling me this, Mark? Because I'm done being married to someone who thinks loyalty is optional, and because you deserve to know what you're really dealing with. After Mark left, I sat alone at the bar, processing what he'd told me. The betrayal was deeper and wider than I'd imagined. It wasn't a moment of weakness or a marriage in crisis. It was a pattern of deception that had been going on for most of our marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. Alicia's asking people to talk to you, convince you to work things out, just thought you should know. I typed back, what are you telling them? That it's none of my business, but not everyone feels that way. He was right. Over the next few days, I started getting calls and visits from mutual friends, all with variations on the same message. I was being too harsh. I should think about the children. Marriage was about forgiveness. Everyone makes mistakes. The worst was Janet Phillips, whose husband worked with me at the restaurant. She cornered me at the grocery store, her voice loud enough for half the produce section to hear. Greg, I know you're hurt, but you need to think about those beautiful children of yours. They need their mother. They need honest parents, I replied, continuing to shop for vegetables like this was a normal conversation. Everyone has problems in their marriage. The key is working through them, not running away at the first sign of trouble. I stopped and looked at her directly. Janet, if Tom was having affairs with multiple people for over a year, would you consider that the first sign of trouble? Her face flushed. That's different. No, it's not. It's exactly the same. The only difference is that you're not the one living with the consequences. But the pressure campaign was working, at least on some people. I could see it in the way conversations stopped when I walked into rooms, in the careful neutrality of people who used to be friends. Alicia and Susie were spinning the narrative hard, painting me as the cold, unforgiving husband who was destroying his family over a mistake. That's when I decided it was time to stop playing defense. I started with social media, not posting anything directly. That would have been too obvious. Instead, I began liking and sharing articles about infidelity, about the long-term psychological effects on children, about the legal and financial consequences of infidelity. Nothing that mentioned my situation specifically, but enough to make people think. Then I started having conversations, casual, friendly conversations with neighbors and mutual friends. I didn't badmouth Alicia or air our dirty laundry. I just asked innocent questions. Did you know Alicia's been going to that gym across town, the expensive one? I thought it was weird since we have a perfectly good one in the neighborhood. Has Susie mentioned anything about covering for Alicia lately? Mark seemed to think she's been stressed about keeping secrets. I'm trying to figure out our credit card bills. Do you know anything about Alicia's Tuesday afternoon activities? There are some charges I can't account for. I never said anything directly accusatory. I just planted seeds and let people draw their own conclusions. And people love to draw conclusions, especially when they involve scandal and betrayal. Within a week, the narrative was starting to shift. Instead of the wronged wife whose husband was being unreasonable, Alicia was becoming the cheating wife whose husband was finally standing up for himself. The turning point came when Margaret Henderson knocked on my door with a casserole and a guilty expression. I owe you an apology, Greg, she said, not quite meeting my eyes. When I heard about you and Alicia, I assumed wrong. What changed your mind? I started thinking about all the times I saw her car gone during the day, all the different men who'd been by the house when you were at work. I thought she was just social, but now, she shook her head. I should have said something. It's not your responsibility to monitor my wife, Margaret. Maybe not, but we're neighbors. We're supposed to look out for each other. After she left, I realized that Alicia's support network was crumbling. The friends who had been pressuring me to forgive her were starting to hear details that made forgiveness seem less like virtue and more like stupidity. That's when Alicia made her first real mistake. Desperate to regain control of the narrative, she decided to confront me publicly. I was leaving Rossetti's after the dinner shift, when she appeared in the parking lot, flanked by Susie and two other women from their book club. They'd clearly been drinking liquid courage for what they thought would be an intervention. "We need to talk," Alicia announced, her voice slurred just enough to be noticeable. "No, we don't," I replied, continuing toward my car. "Yes, we do. You're poisoning people against me, spreading lies." "What lies, Alicia? That you've been cheating on me? That you've been using our friends to cover for you? That you've been spending our money on your affairs? Which part is the lie? You're taking everything out of context. The context is that you've been systematically betraying our marriage for over a year. What context makes that okay?" Susie stepped forward. "Greg, you're being cruel. Alicia made some mistakes, but she loves you." "She loves me?" I laughed, and the sound was harsh enough to make all four women flinch. "Susie, she's been screwing her boss, her personal trainer, and God knows who else. If that's love, I'd hate to see what indifference looks like." "That's not true," Alicia started, but I cut her off. "Which part? The boss? His name is David Chen, and according to your credit card statements, you've been having lunch dates with him for 8 months. The trainer? Marcus Webb at CrossFit downtown, where you've been paying for private sessions that last 3 hours? Should I keep going?" The color drained from Alicia's face. She hadn't expected me to have names and details. She thought I only knew about Dominic. How did I find out that my wife is a serial cheater? I hired a private investigator, Alicia. Turns out it's not that hard to track someone who's not trying very hard to hide what they're doing. That was a lie. I hadn't hired anyone yet. But the credit card statements and phone records had been enough to piece together most of the story, and Alicia's reaction confirmed the rest. "You had me followed?" she whispered. "I had my wife investigated because she was stealing money and lying to me. And you know what the really sad part is? You were so careless about it that I didn't even need a professional. Any idiot with access to our bank statements could have figured it out." The women behind Alicia were starting to look uncomfortable. This wasn't the conversation they'd expected to have. They'd come here thinking they were supporting a friend through a difficult divorce, not covering for someone who'd been systematically cheating for years. "I think we should go," one of them said quietly. But Alicia wasn't done. "You fool!" she hissed. "You self-righteous fool! You think you're so perfect, but you're not. You're cold and distant and faithful," I interrupted. "Don't forget faithful. I know it's not a quality you value highly, but some of us still think it matters." I got in my car and drove away, leaving them standing in the parking lot. In my rearview mirror, I could see Alicia crying while her friends tried to comfort her. But their body language was different now. Less supportive, more uncomfortable. By the time I got home, I had 3 text messages from people who'd witnessed the confrontation. Word was already spreading that Alicia had been cheating with multiple people, that there was evidence, that her husband had been more patient than anyone had realized. The narrative had shifted completely. I was no longer the unreasonable husband. I was the sufferer who'd finally had enough. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because Alicia and her enablers had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that I would just take their betrayal quietly, that I'd be too embarrassed or too civilized to fight back effectively. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. The private investigator I actually hired turned out to be worth every penny. Sarah Martinez was a former police detective who specialized in matrimonial cases, and she had a talent for uncovering the kind of details that could make or break a divorce settlement. "Your wife wasn't just careless," she told me, spreading photographs and documents across my kitchen table. "She was reckless. Look at this." The evidence was damning. Hotel receipts charged to our joint credit card, photos of Alicia entering apartment buildings during work hours, text message records showing hundreds of communications with men who weren't her husband, bank statements showing cash withdrawals that coincided with her girls' nights out. "How many?" I asked. "That I can prove 5 different men over the past 18 months. But there are patterns suggesting it goes back further." 5 men. While I'd been working to support our family, while I'd been coming home tired and stressed and trying to be a good father, my wife had been conducting a one-woman campaign to sleep with half the city. "The good news," Sarah continued, "is that this gives you tremendous leverage in the divorce proceedings. Infidelity, especially this extensive, tends to influence judges when it comes to asset division and custody arrangements. What about the others? The men she was seeing? What about them? Do they know about each other?" Sarah smiled, and it wasn't a nice expression. "That's an interesting question. From what I can tell, each of them thinks he's special. Her boss believes he's her only extramarital relationship. The trainer thinks she left her husband for him. Dominic thinks he's her great love affair. They don't know she's been playing them all. Not yet. I stared at the photographs for a long moment, feeling something cold and calculating settle in my chest. What would happen if they found out? Hypothetically, it would probably end all of those relationships very quickly. Men don't like discovering they're part of a rotation. Hypothetically. Sarah gathered up her materials and stood to leave. I'll have the full report ready for your lawyer by tomorrow. But Greg, whatever you're thinking about doing, be careful. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it can backfire if you're not smart about it. After she left, I sat alone in my kitchen, thinking about justice versus revenge. Janet Morrison had said something similar, that revenge was expensive and hard on the kids. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about making sure that everyone who had participated in the destruction of my marriage understood that there were consequences for their actions. I started with David Chen, Alicia's boss at the marketing firm where she worked part-time. According to Sarah's report, he was married with 3 kids and had been having an affair with Alicia for 8 months. He thought he was her only extramarital relationship. I waited until lunchtime, then called his office. David Chen's office. This is Michelle. Hi, Michelle. This is Greg Patterson, Alicia Patterson's husband. I was hoping to speak with David about a surprise I'm planning for Alicia. Oh, how sweet. Let me put you through. David's voice was cautious when he came on the line. Greg, is everything okay? Everything's fine, David. I just wanted to thank you. Thank me? For being such a good friend to Alicia during this difficult time. She's told me how supportive you've been, how you've been there for her when she needed someone to talk to. There was a long pause. Yes, of course. Alicia's a valued employee. She's more than that, though, isn't she? She's told me about your special friendship, about how much you care for each other. Another pause, longer this time. Greg, I think there might be some misunderstanding. Oh, there's no misunderstanding. I know all about your relationship, David. The hotels, the long lunches, the private meetings, I know everything. Look, I can explain. You don't need to explain anything to me, but you might want to explain it to Marcus Webb at CrossFit Downtown and to Dominic Torino. They're both under the impression that they're Alicia's only extramarital relationship. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You see, David, my wife has been very busy. 5 different men, according to my private investigator. You're all very special to her, just not quite as special as you thought. Jesus Christ, he whispered. I thought you should know since you've been so supportive. Have a great day. I hung up and immediately called Marcus Webb at the gym. CrossFit Downtown, this is Marcus. Marcus, this is Greg Patterson. I believe you know my wife, Alicia. His voice immediately became guarded. Yeah, she's a client. Why? Well, she won't be for much longer. We're getting divorced, and I thought you should know that she might be looking for someone to help her through this difficult time. Okay. Of course, she's got plenty of support already. Her boss, David Chen, has been very attentive. And then there's Dominic Torino and a few others, but I'm sure she'd appreciate having you in her corner, too. Wait, what? Oh, did she not mention the others? That's awkward. Well, I'm sure you can work it out among yourselves. You all seem like reasonable men. I hung up before he could respond and immediately dialed Dominic's number. What do you want, Greg? Just thought you should know that Alicia's other boyfriends are probably going to be calling you soon. What the hell are you talking about? I'm talking about David Chen and Marcus Webb and the others. They just found out about each other and they're probably not very happy. You might want to prepare for some interesting conversations. You son of a witch. Have a great day, Dominic. I hung up and turned off my phone, then sat back to wait for the chaos to unfold. It didn't take long. Within an hour, my phone was buzzing with missed calls and text messages. From Alicia, from Dominic, from numbers I didn't recognize. But I ignored them all and went to work, where I spent the evening serving customers and pretending everything was normal while my wife's carefully constructed web of lies collapsed around her. The next morning, I turned my phone back on to find 47 missed calls and 63 text messages. Most were from Alicia, ranging from angry to desperate to pleading. But there were also messages from Susie, from Richard, from several numbers I didn't recognize. The most interesting was from Marcus Webb. You need to call me. We need to talk. I called him back. Jesus, man, I had no idea, he said without preamble. She told me she was separated, that you were just dragging out the divorce to be vindictive. And now? Now I know she's been playing all of us. That other guy, Chen, he called me yesterday screaming about how I was ruining his marriage. Turns out, he didn't know about me either. What about Dominic? That a-hole showed up at my gym last night wanting to fight me. Had to call the cops to get him out of here. He's blaming everyone except the woman who lied to all of us. So what now? Now I'm done with her. And I wanted you to know, I'm sorry, man. I wouldn't have gotten involved if I'd known the real situation. After I hung up, I felt something that might have been satisfaction, but it was tempered by the realization that this was just the beginning. I'd exposed Alicia's web of lies, but there were still consequences to face. Still people who needed to understand their role in what had happened, starting with Susie. I found her at the coffee shop where she and Alicia used to meet, sitting alone at their usual table, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "We need to talk," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Greg, I know you're angry, but..." "I'm not angry, Susie. I'm disappointed." "Disappointed? In you. In the choices you made. In the person you turned out to be." Her face crumpled. "I was trying to be a good friend." "No, you were trying to be an enabler. There's a difference." She was unhappy, so she should have talked to me, or gone to counseling, or asked for a divorce. She shouldn't have started screwing around with multiple men while using you to cover for her. Susie stared down at her coffee cup. "I didn't know about the others." "But you knew about the lying. You knew about the cheating. You knew about the hotel rooms and the fake stories and the money she was spending on her affairs. And you helped her do it. I thought maybe if she got it out of her system..." "You thought what? That systematic infidelity was just a phase she'd grow out of?" "I thought she loved you and would come back to you when she was ready." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Do you know what the worst part is, Susie? It's not that you helped her cheat. It's that you convinced yourself you were doing it out of friendship instead of admitting that you were doing it because it made you feel important. That's not true, isn't it? You were the keeper of secrets, the enabler, the one who made it all possible. It made you feel special, didn't it? Being trusted with information that her husband didn't have?" Tears were streaming down her face now. "I never meant for it to go this far." "How far did you mean for it to go? 1 affair instead of 5? 6 months instead of 18? At what point were you planning to develop a conscience?" I stood to leave, but turned back for one final observation. "You destroyed 2 marriages, Susie. Mine and yours. Because Mark knows everything now, and he's not the kind of man who forgives someone for helping his friends betray their spouses. I hope keeping Alicia's secrets was worth losing your own husband." As I walked away, I could hear her sobbing behind me, but I felt no sympathy. She'd made her choices just like everyone else. Now she could live with the consequences. But I still wasn't done. There was one more person who needed to understand exactly what their betrayal had cost and what it was going to cost them going forward. It was time to have a final conversation with my wife. I found Alicia at Dominic's apartment, which seemed fitting somehow. She was sitting on his couch looking like she'd aged 5 years in the past week, her perfect suburban mom facade finally cracking under the weight of her collapsed lies. Dominic answered the door with a black eye and a split lip. Souvenirs from his encounter with Marcus Webb or one of the other men who'd discovered they'd been played. "What do you want?" he snarled. "I want to talk to my wife, privately." "She doesn't want to talk to you." "Yes, I do," Alicia said from behind him, her voice small and defeated. "Let him in." Dominic's apartment was exactly what I'd expected. Expensive furniture that he probably couldn't afford, a giant TV, weights scattered around the living room. The home of a man who'd never quite grown up, which made him perfect for a woman who'd never wanted to grow up either. "You destroyed everything," Alicia said without preamble. "My job, my relationships, my friendships. David fired me. Marcus won't even return my calls. Half the neighborhood won't speak to me." "I didn't destroy anything, Alicia. I just stopped pretending that what you were doing was okay. You turned everyone against me. I told people the truth. If that turned them against you, maybe you should think about what that says about your behavior." She was crying now, but they were angry tears, not sad ones. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Seeing me suffer?" "No, I'm not enjoying it, but I'm not going to pretend to be sorry about it either." Dominic stepped forward. "You need to leave. You've done enough damage." "Have I? Because from where I'm standing, I'm just getting started." "What's that supposed to mean?" Alicia asked. I pulled out my phone and showed her a text message from my lawyer. It means the divorce papers are being filed tomorrow. It means I'm asking for full custody of the kids based on your infidelity and reckless behavior. It means I'm going after you for every penny you spent on your affairs. You can't take my children away from me. I can try, and given the evidence I have, I think I'll succeed. Greg, please, she said, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely frightened. I know I made mistakes, but they're my kids too. They're the kids you lied to for over a year. The kids you put at risk by bringing strange men around the house. The kids whose college funds you spent on hotel rooms with your boyfriends. I never brought anyone to the house. Marcus Webb 3 times. David Chen twice. Should I keep going? Her face went white. How do you know that? I know everything, Alicia. I know about the credit card charges, the phone records, the lies you told the kids about where you were going. I know about the STD scare last month that you managed to keep quiet. I know about the pregnancy test you took 6 weeks ago. Stop, she whispered. I know about the money you borrowed from your sister to pay for the termination because you weren't sure whose baby it was. Dominic's head snapped around to stare at her. What termination? I know about the second phone you kept hidden in your car, the one you used to coordinate your affairs so I wouldn't see the messages on your regular phone. Alicia, what is he talking about? Dominic demanded. I know about the lies you told each of your boyfriends about the others, how you convinced them all that they were special, that they were the only ones. Shut up, Alicia said, but her voice was barely audible. I know about the plan you and Susie cooked up to clean out our joint accounts and disappear with the kids if I ever found out about your affairs. That was a bluff, but the look on Alicia's face told me I'd hit close to the truth. You're lying, she said, but there was no conviction in her voice. Am I? Should we call Susie and ask her about the conversation you had 2 weeks ago about opening a bank account in your maiden name? Dominic was staring at Alicia like he'd never seen her before. Jesus Christ, who are you? I'm someone who got tired of being taken for granted, she snapped, some of her old defiance returning. I'm someone who wanted to feel alive again instead of just going through the motions of being a wife and mother. You're someone who destroyed 2 families and hurt everyone who cared about you because you were bored, I corrected. You're someone who put your own selfish desires ahead of your children's well-being and your husband's trust. Don't lecture me about being selfish. You were never here, never present, never cheating on you with 5 different people while stealing money to pay for it, I interrupted. Never lying to our children about where I was going or who I was with. Never putting our family at risk because I was too selfish to either fix our marriage or end it honestly. She was sobbing now, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd had a 1.5 years to make different choices, to be honest, to consider the consequences of her actions. She'd chosen this path at every step. What do you want from me? She asked. I want you to sign the divorce papers without a fight. I want you to agree to supervise visitation with the kids until you can prove you're stable. I want you to pay back every penny you stole from our joint accounts. And if I don't, then we go to court, and I present all of this evidence to a judge, every hotel receipt, every text message, every lie you told. I put David Chen and Marcus Webb and all the others on the witness stand to testify about your affairs. I drag this out for months while the legal fees pile up and your reputation gets destroyed even more thoroughly than it already has been. You fool. I'm the fool who stayed faithful to his marriage vows while his wife was screwing half the city. I'm the fool who worked 60-hour weeks to support a family while his wife was spending their money on affairs. I'm the fool who's finally done being a sufferer. I stood to leave, but turned back for one final observation. You know what the really pathetic part is, Alicia? You could have had everything. A husband who loved you, beautiful children, a comfortable life, respect in the community, and you threw it all away for what? A few hours in hotel rooms with men who don't even respect you enough to be honest with you? They cared about me. They used you, just like you used me, and just like you used everyone else who was stupid enough to trust you. I walked toward the door, but Dominic blocked my path. We're not done here, he said. Yes, we are. You think you can just destroy people's lives and walk away? I think I can stop letting people destroy my life and walk away. There's a difference. He grabbed my arm and I could see the violence building in his eyes. This was what he understood. Physical confrontation, intimidation, the threat of force. But I wasn't the same man who'd walked into Richard's kitchen a week ago. Let go of me, Dominic. Or what? Or I'll call the police and have you arrested for attack. And then I'll make sure that every woman in this city knows exactly what kind of man you are. What kind of man is that? The kind who seduces married women, then threatens their husbands when the lies catch up with him. The kind who thinks he's entitled to someone else's wife and children because he can bench press more weight. The kind who's too stupid to realize he was being played just as much as everyone else. I pulled my arm free and stepped back. Face it, Dominic, she was never going to leave me for you. You were just entertainment, a distraction, someone to make her feel young and desirable. If I hadn't found out, she'd have gotten bored with you eventually and moved on to someone else. That's not true. Ask her. Ask her if she ever talked about divorcing me and marrying you. Ask her if she ever made any real plans for a future together. I could see from his expression that he already knew the answer. You were never the love of her life, Dominic. You were just another mistake in a long line of mistakes. And now you get to live with the consequences just like everyone else. I walked out of the apartment and down to my car, leaving them to sort out the wreckage of their relationship. As I drove away, I could see them through the window, already arguing, the stress and guilt and mutual recrimination tearing apart whatever they'd thought they had together. It was almost poetic justice. Two selfish people who'd destroyed other people's lives for their own gratification, now turning on each other when the fantasy collapsed. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more act in this drama, one final scene that would bring everything full circle. And it was going to happen exactly where it all began, at a party, in front of all the people who'd chosen sides, who'd enabled the betrayal, who'd tried to convince me that I was the one being unreasonable. It was time for everyone to see exactly what their choices had cost, and what justice looked like when a good man finally stopped being good. The opportunity came sooner than I'd expected. Richard called me on a Friday afternoon, his voice nervous and apologetic. Greg, I know things have been weird between us, but Nikki's insisting on having our annual Christmas party. She says we can't let what happened ruin our traditions. And she wants to invite everyone, including Alicia. I told her it was a bad idea, but she thinks it might be a chance for people to, I don't know, make peace or something. When is it? Tomorrow night. Look, you don't have to come if you don't want to. I understand. I'll be there. Are you sure? Because if it's going to be uncomfortable, Richard, I wouldn't miss it for the world. I spent Saturday preparing carefully. I showered and shaved, put on my best suit, the charcoal gray one I'd worn to our wedding. I styled my hair and chose a tie that Alicia had always said brought out my eyes. I wanted to look like a man who was winning because I was. The party was already in full swing when I arrived. The same crowd as always. Neighbors, co-workers, friends from the kids' school activities. But the atmosphere was different this time. Conversations stopped when people saw me, then resumed in hushed tones. Everyone knew what had happened, but no one was quite sure how to act around me. I got myself a drink and made small talk, acting like everything was normal. I complimented Nikki on the decorations, discussed restaurant business with Tom Phillips, asked the Hendersons about their vacation plans. Normal suburban party conversation, as if my life hadn't imploded in this very house 6 weeks earlier. Alicia arrived fashionably late, alone. Dominic was nowhere to be seen, which wasn't surprising given how their relationship had disintegrated after our final confrontation. She looked good. She'd always looked good. But there was something brittle about her now, like she was holding herself together through sheer force of will. She worked the room carefully, staying close to her remaining allies, avoiding eye contact with me. Susie was there too, also alone, since Mark had filed for divorce the week before. They stood together near the kitchen, two women who'd lost everything because they'd chosen excitement over integrity. I waited until the party was at its peak, when everyone was relaxed and the booze had loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. Then I walked over to the makeshift bar where Richard was playing bartender. "Can I get everyone's attention?" I asked, loud enough to be heard over the conversation and Christmas music. The room gradually fell silent, dozens of faces turning toward me with expressions ranging from curiosity to concern to barely concealed anticipation. Everyone knew something was about to happen. "I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight," I began, my voice calm and conversational. "And I wanted to thank Richard and Nikki for hosting, as always." Polite murmurs of agreement from the crowd. "I also wanted to take this opportunity to clear up some misconceptions that have been floating around lately about my divorce." The silence in the room became absolute. I could see Alicia's face going pale, could see Susie edging toward the door. You see, there's been a lot of talk about forgiveness and second chances and working things out for the sake of the children, and I appreciate everyone's concern. I really do. But I think it's important that you all understand exactly what you've been asking me to forgive. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder where I'd stored copies of all the evidence Sarah Martinez had gathered. Alicia has been having affairs for over 18 months. Not one affair, 5 different affairs with 5 different men, sometimes overlapping. She spent over $12,000 of our joint money on hotel rooms, restaurants, and gifts for her boyfriends. Gasps from around the room. I could see people looking at each other, then at Alicia, who was now crying silently. She lied to our children about where she was going and who she was with. She put our family at risk by bringing her boyfriends to our house when the kids were there. She had a termination 6 weeks ago because she wasn't sure which of her boyfriends was the father. Stop, Alicia whispered, but I was just getting started. She convinced her best friend Susie to help her maintain these lies, to provide alibis and cover stories, to help her steal money from our joint accounts to fund her affairs. I turned to look at Susie, who was now openly sobbing. And when I found out about all of this, when I finally said enough was enough, she tried to turn all of you against me. She painted herself as the sufferer of an unreasonable husband who wouldn't forgive a simple mistake. The room was completely silent except for the soft Christmas music still playing in the background. So when you ask me why I won't forgive her, why I won't work things out for the sake of the children, I want you to understand what you're really asking. You're asking me to pretend that systematic betrayal is forgivable. You're asking me to teach my children that there are no consequences for destroying other people's lives. You're asking me to reward 18 months of lies and theft and infidelity with understanding and compassion. I looked directly at Alicia, who was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and despair. And I'm here to tell you that I won't do it. I won't pretend that what she did was okay. I won't enable her behavior or the behavior of people who helped her. And I won't apologize for finally standing up for myself and my children. I finished my drink and set the glass down on the bar. The divorce papers were finalized yesterday. I have full custody of the kids, with supervised visitation for Alicia once she completes counseling and proves she's stable. She's required to pay back every penny she stole, plus interest. And she's agreed to all of this because she knows that the alternative, having all of this evidence presented in open court, would be even more humiliating than what just happened here. I looked around the room at all the faces staring at me, some shocked, some embarrassed, some clearly rethinking their previous opinions about who was the sufferer in this situation. I want to thank those of you who supported me through this, who understood that some betrayals are too deep to forgive, and for those of you who didn't, well, now you know the whole story. You can make your own judgments about who deserves your sympathy and support. I walked toward the door, then turned back for one final observation. Oh, and Alicia, next time you decide to destroy someone's life for your own entertainment, you might want to choose someone who's not smart enough to fight back. You picked the wrong man this time. The room erupted as I left, voices raised in shock and anger and recrimination. Through the window, I could see people surrounding Alicia and Susie, demanding explanations, expressing outrage at having been manipulated and lied to. I got in my car and drove home through the quiet December night, past houses decorated with Christmas lights and filled with families celebrating the season. Normal families with normal problems, not the kind of twisted dysfunction that had defined my marriage for the past year and a half. At home, I poured myself a scotch and sat in my living room looking at the Christmas tree I'd put up with my kids the weekend before. They were with Alicia for her supervised visit, but they'd be back tomorrow, and we'd have Christmas morning together in our house. Just the 3 of us. My phone was buzzing with text messages, some supportive, some critical, some just curious about the details, but I ignored them all. I'd said what I needed to say, done what I needed to do. Justice wasn't always pretty, and it wasn't always kind, but sometimes it was necessary. Sometimes good people had to stop being good in order to prevent bad people from destroying everything decent in the world. Alicia had gambled that I would be too civilized, too concerned about appearances, too afraid of conflict to really fight back. She counted on my decency to protect her from the consequences of her choices. She'd been wrong. I raised my glass in a silent toast to the empty room, to the end of one life and the beginning of another, to the hard-earned knowledge that sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop trying to save everyone else. Outside, snow was beginning to fall, covering the neighborhood in a blanket of white that made everything look clean and new again. A fresh start, a clean slate, a chance to build something better on the ruins of what had come before. Tomorrow, my children would come home to a father who had finally learned to stand up for himself and for them. They would learn that actions have consequences, that integrity matters, that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight is ugly and painful. And somewhere across town, in whatever temporary shelter she'd found for herself, my ex-wife would be learning the hardest lesson of all, that you can't build happiness on other people's pain, and that eventually everyone pays the price for their choices. It was a lesson she should have learned a long time ago, but better late than never. The snow continued to fall, and I sat at my warm house with my scotch and my hard-won peace, finally understanding what justice felt like when it was served cold and complete and absolutely deserved.